because the pipe is heavy, it has to have support. In the 1953 easement, I was very surprised to find that somebody that really knew pipeline engineering had been involved in this, because they set a limit on how much of this pipe could be hanging in space. And they said 75 feet of the pipe. And why did they choose 75 feet? Well, let's talk, just before we get into that, a little bit about the pipes. I got to thank Enbridge a great deal. I'd have been pretty dead in the water trying to figure this thing out if it hadn't been for this report that Enbridge published, 2014, where they released some data on this pipe. This tells me everything I need to know about the pipe. The pipe we're going to be talking about a little bit is here, the two pipelines that go under the Straits, and this stretch here, which in Enbridge talk, MA to BC, that's Mackinac City to Bay City, or here, this is from Iron River to the Straits. What you notice is that it's all 30-inch diameter pipe here and here, 20-inch under the Straits. The Straits pipe is just very strong, 7/8 wall thickness. You wouldn't think there could be any problems with that. Why did they make it that thick? Very simple reason. This pipe isn't held to the bottom. It needed to be heavy enough so it wouldn't float up. There have been pipelines that have floated up, and engineers find that very embarrassing. So the state of Michigan and the engineers came up with a minimum weight for this 20-inch pipe of 160 pounds a foot. That turns out to be 20-inch pipe with 7/8 walls. And it's that thick so it won't float. It had nothing to do with engineering strength considerations. They could have been much thinner. The rest of the pipe, many wall, all 30-inch diameter, but many wall thicknesses. 9/32, 5/16, 11/32, 3/8. And then the kind of pipe, this tells me exactly what metal it's made of. Why all the different thicknesses of pipe? Why would you do that? Well, when you build pipelines, a lot of them are built with what's called telescoped construction. And this pipeline appears to have been built that way. If you have a pump station here and a lot of pressure, and this is the other end where the pressure is low, the pipe doesn't need to be thick here. It needs to be thick here. So typically they built this pipeline telescoped like that. It's all 30-inch OD. It's got different wall thicknesses. It was originally intended to have 4 pump stations, if you remember, coming back. And between those there were 4 telescope sections between them. After that, many pump stations were plugged in. We've got 12 pump stations now. They're all in there, hooked to pipe of different wall thicknesses. This pipeline should really be considered as 12 separate pipelines between the pump stations. I was able to learn about what kind of pipe went where. If you want to actually get into this thing, this is the address of the 1968 MPSC order that was the last time they took a hard look at this thing and set rigorous pressure limits on it. The MPSC set discharge pressure limits for all these pump stations. The ones that we're interested in, Noggin Way runs at 698. Some of these are more, some of them are less. The reason why is they're pumping into pipe at different thickness. I calculated independently of what the MPSC recommended, or not recommended, mandated as the maximum pressure, but because by agreement, Lakehead Pipeline agreed that they would run this pipe at a maximum of 65% of the yield pressure. What's the yield pressure? That's where the steel will go from being elastic to being plastic, and this pipeline will start to blow up like a balloon. Not something you want to get to. You have to stay below that pressure, so the MPSC regulated them to discharge pressures that are at 65% of that yield pressure. My calculations agree very well with what the MPSC regulated. So I think I understand both how the pipeline was designed and why the limits were set as they are. The easement has separate restrictions for the sections under the Straits, and it's that 20-inch pipe. Now I have to got a couple things I want to pass around here. There's two kinds of pipe that are used in this. All the 30-inch pipe that is used in the pipeline is seamed pipe. It's made by taking a sheet of steel, rolling it into a round shape, and then welding up a seam. And so this is typical of the seamed pipe that's almost everywhere in the pipeline. Cough here. Fortunately, my wife gave me one. This is what kind of pipe the rest of it's made out of. This is seamless pipe. It's much more expensive. It's much heavier duty stuff. The way it's made is they take a hot billet of steel, drive a big punch through it, make a hole, and then start rolling it up into a single piece of pipe. It does not have a longitudinal seam, which is where a lot of pipes break. It does have the girth welds. The pipe under the Straits, I'm told, came in 27-foot lengths, and I forget how many exactly. There's something like 4,000 girth welds in the pipe under the Straits. They were all X-ray. There was a lot of talk when I first became aware of this, people were talking. This is when Enbridge was increasing the capacity of the line. Everybody was worried about the pressure in the line. Is the pressure too high? So, using the pipeline handbook, I recalculated the pressure. And what you have here is the results of one of my calculations. I'm not going to go into this very far, but what it shows is for the flow rate of 540,000 barrels a day, I did calculations for 4 different kinds of oil that could be pumped through it. And this is without any drag reduction, which Enbridge does do. Some of the oils, these are all oils right out of Enbridge's. They have a schedule of oil that they'll accept for shipment. These are all those. And what I found is that for 3 of these, the pipeline operates at very reasonable pressures, well below anything that would get close to those limits set by the MPSC. But you have to remember, those limits set by the MPSC were based on brand new pipe, not rusty pipe. What I found is that if you look right here, what's the highest pressure in this line when it's running? It's limited by the easement to 600, but I calculate pressures like this. Very low pressures, really, considering the pipe. The other important thing is the calculation of how much horsepower it takes to run this thing. And these are, again, this fits in with what I know of the pump stations. They're typically around 6,000 horsepower per pump station, a little more perhaps. What's this case over here? Well, this is the case of dilbit, diluted bitumen. That's what was in the pipe in Marshall, caused this. That was so difficult to clean up. So the question was, can they pump dilbit through this thing? And I took a look at it, and as this calculation is done, the answer is absolutely not. The discharge pressure at the pump would be way above the limit, but even more importantly, they haven't got 13,000 horsepower at that pump station. Could not pump dilbit as that calculation is done. So then, as engineers will do, we compute a few other scenarios. Is there any way Enbridge could pump dilbit through this pipe?
They couldn't do it.
Yeah, can line 5 transport dilbit. And I was surprised once I played with it. Yup, it could be done. What would they have to do? Pump dilbit through the pipe. One is they'd have to heat her up. That's done. Keystone XL was designed to run just about the boiling point of water. So if you heated this oil to 200 and could get 25% drag reduction from your drag reduction polymer, then all of a sudden we're down at 5,000 horsepower and the pressures are within the limits of the regulation. So line 5 could carry dilbit if you wanted to push it to the extreme. I don't think that anybody that's a reasonable operator would consider putting heated oil on a line that was designed for non-heated oil. So I just really don't think that carrying dilbit in this line is a reasonable possibility. I'm very confident that what Enbridge has done as far as operating pressures in the line is all fine. I can't criticize them at all for that. That's basic engineering stuff, and that's the way it looks like it works to me. Now, where does this get complicated? There were two things that the engineers that designed this thing didn't really know. And what were